my goodness. So, hi, Nancy. Hey, Lola. So I'm sitting there. I'm like trying to make this. Sorry, I did make the video. I was trying to post it, and for some reason, it kept saying it was posting, but I would never see it because it was going to monetize it and also put in a new photo for the thumbnail. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna do that, right? Yeah, right. That doesn't help at all. It didn't do nothing. So I went back to Venmo, and I was on there, and I had to repost it. Nothing is happening. I don't know what's going on. And then I go on to StreamYard. I can't turn my mic on. I can't turn my camera on. It's like, what? Yeah, I'm just gonna check something really quick to see if. Oh my god, nothing posted. What is going on? I'm gonna have to figure this out after this live. Damn. I don't know what's going on with that. I'm gonna have to figure this out later. All right. No point worrying about it now. All right. I guess I'll just get right into it. Ugh. Let me see here. There's a very small part to read, and then it goes on to part 2. Okay, so I'll do that. The artsy nurse won't be here. She's got a meeting, so she won't be here. I was actually thinking if Brittany was up for it, if she wanted to come up and talk, because she seems to know, I don't know, everything about this book. Like, I could use her as a source. I mean, because she seems to know everything, right? She really does. All right, I'm going to start. So, October 1969. You guys can hear me, right? Oh, I feel like everything's been going wrong for me today. I just want to make sure. Yeah, Lola, she honestly, the Mare is probably like no offense to anyone else. I love all my moderators, but no, Mare's the shit. I've never had anybody ever be this good as a moderator. Ever. Ever. She's amazing. Amazing. Best moderator I've ever had. Okay, good. All right, I'll start then. Okay, October 1969. October 10th, 2 months had passed since the Tate homicides. What is going on behind the scenes in Los Angeles police investigation, if there is such a thing, of the bizarre murder of Sharon Tate and 4 others, the Hollywood Citizen News asked in a front page editorial. Oh my god, I'm sorry, Nancy. Ow. Hi, Alberta. Hey, Stella. Hi. I'm saying that because I didn't know it's your doggy. Alrighty. Sorry, I had to stop. I seen what Nancy wrote. Ow, I'm so sorry. Officially, LAPD remained silent, as they had since their last news conference on the case on September 3rd, when Deputy Sheriff Houghton while admitting that they still didn't know who had committed the murders, so the detectives had made tremendous progress. Okay, Britt. Stella's still in surgery? Oh my god, I'm so sorry. That's been a long time. Poor baby. I wish her all the best, honestly. Exactly what progress, reporters asked. The pressure was building, the fear remained, if possible, even increased, owing to the suggestion, less than subtly hinted at by a popular TV commentator, that perhaps the police were covering for a person or persons prominent in the entertainment industry. She just went in again? Oh my god. Meanwhile, the leaks continued. The media reported that narcotics had been found in several places at the Tate residence, that some of the victims had been on drugs at the time they died. By October, it was also widely reported that the gun sought was a .22, though it was identified as a pistol rather than a revolver. And there was even one TV report which the police quickly broke silence to deny that pieces of the gun's grip had been found at the crime scene. The TV station stuck by its information despite the official denial. Sorry, Nancy says, I feel stupid. It was a split second. I think I stabbed my fat and my so. Oh my god. Okay, that was good. Crap, I missed my spot. Okay, yeah, the TV station stuck by its information despite the official denial. A 22 with a broken grip. Several times Bernard got to wondering about that gun that his son Stephen had found. Could it be the Tate murder weapon? But that was ridiculous. After all, the police themselves had the gun, and had it been the weapon, would surely have returned by now to ask more questions and search the hillside. Since turning the weapon over to them on September 1st, Weiss had heard nothing. When there was no follow-up, Stephen had taken it on himself to make a search of the area. He'd found nothing. I'm finding it very hard to stick to this book. So Brittany says, Donnie, what was it? Butterfly kicked Donnie in the nads when I got into the door. Oh my god. Oh. Okay, he'd found nothing still. Beverly Glen wasn't at all that far from Cielo Drive, just a couple of miles. But Bernard Weiss had better things to do than play detective. That was LAPD's responsibility. On October 17th, Lieutenant Helter and Deputy Chef Houghton, who knows, told reporters that they had evidence which, if it could be traced, might lead to the killers, plural, of Shannon, Tate, and the 4 others. They refused to be more specific. The press conference had been called in an attempt to relieve some of the pressure on the LAPD. No solid information was released, but a number of current rumors were denied. Less than a week later, on October 23rd, LAPD very hastily called another press conference to announce that they had a clue to identify the identity of the killer, singular, of the 5 Tate victims, a pair of prescription eyeglasses that had been found at the scene. The announcement was made only because several papers had that same day already printed the wanted flyer on the glasses. Approximately 18,000 eye doctors had received the flyer from their various members' association. In addition, it had been printed verbatim in the weekly and eye, ear, nose, and throat monthly that had a combined national circulation of over 29,000. What was surprising was not that the story had leaked, but that it had taken so long for it to do so. Starred for solid news, the press heralded a major breakthrough in the case, overlooking the obvious fact that the police had had the glasses in their possession since the day the Tate victims were discovered. Wow. Lieutenant Helder refused comment when a reporter, obviously with excellent connections inside the department, asked if it was true that to the date the glasses flyer had yielded only 7 suspects, all of whom had been eliminated. It was indicative of the desperation of the Tate detectives that the second and last Tate progress report prepared that day for the press conference stated, at this time, Garretson has not been positively eliminated. Okay, go kitty. In the Tate report covering the period September 1st to October 22nd, 1969. No, okay, you can't go on there, sweetheart, okay? I'm trying to do this. No, kitty. Please. Okay, no. There. The Tate report covering the period September 1st to October 22nd, 1969 ran 226 pages, most of which were devoted to closing out the cases against Wilson, Pickett, et.al., etc. al. Johnny's ice packing it. I am getting so distracted between the cat, Brittany, Nancy. Oh my god, thank you. There. One distraction gone for now, anyways. The LaBianca report, closed out on October 15th, was a little shorter, 22 pages, but far more interesting. In one section of the report, the detectives mentioned their use of the C2 computer. An MO run on all crimes where the victims were tied is presently being run. Future runs will be made concentrating on the peculiarity. Holy. The pure reality. I can't even say I know what I want to say, but I can't. Of the robberies, used gloves, wore glasses, or disabled the phone. Robberies, plural, wore glasses, disabled the phone. The phone at the LaBianca residence was not disabled, nor was there evidence that a LaBianca assailant wore glasses. These references were to Tate. The conclusion is inescapable. The LaBianca detectives had decided on their own, and without consulting the Tate detectives, to see if they could solve the Tate as well as LaBianca case. The second LaBianca report was interesting for still another reason. It listed 11 suspects, the last of whom was one Manson Charles. All right, now we're on part 2, the killers. And there's some quotes here. You couldn't meet a nicer group of people. Leslie Van Houten, describing the Manson family to Sergeant Michael McGann. At 12 o'clock, a meeting rounds a table for a seance in the dark, with voices out of nowhere, put on especially by the children for a lark. The Beatles' Cry Baby Cry White Album. You have to have real love in your heart to do this for people. Susan Atkins, telling Virginia Graham why she stabbed Sharon Tate. Wow. October 15th to the 31st, 1969. The physical distance between Parker Center headquarters of the Los Angeles Police Department and the Hall of Justice, which houses the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, is 4 blocks. That distance can be traversed in the time it takes to dial a phone, but it isn't always that easy. Though LAPD and LASO cooperate on investigations that involve both jurisdictions, there exists between them a certain amount of jealousy. One of the LaBianca detectives would later admit he and his fellow officers should have checked with LASO homicide detectives in mid-August to see if they had any similar murders, but it wasn't until October 15th, after most of the other leads had evaporated, that they did so. When they did, they learned of the Hinman murder, and unlike Sergeant Buckles of the Tate team, they found the similarities striking enough to merit further investigation. There have been some recent developments in the Hinman case, Sergeants Whiteley and Gunther told them. Less than a week before, Inyo County officers had raided isolated Barker Ranch, located in an extremely rugged, almost inaccessible area south of Death Valley National Monument. The raid, based on charges ranging from grand theft to arson, had netted 24 members of a hippie cult known as the Manson family. Many of these same people, including their leader, Charles Manson, a 34-year-old ex-con with a long and checkered criminal history, had also been arrested in an earlier raid conducted by LASO, which had occurred on August 16th at Spawn's Movie Ranch in Chatsworth. During the Barker raid, which took place over a 3-day period, 2 young girls had appeared out of the bushes near a road some miles from the ranch asking the officers for protection. They claimed they had been attempting to flee the family and they were afraid for their lives. One was named Stephanie Scram, and the other was Kitty Lutzinger. Leave. Whitley and Gunther had been looking for Kitty ever since learning that she had a girlfriend of Bobby Boselli. I probably butchered that too, so we'll go with Bobby. The suspects in the Hinman murder. Informed of her arrest, they drove 225 miles to Independence, the Inyo County seat, to question her. Kitty, a freckled, frightened 17-year-old, was 5 months pregnant with Boselli's child. Though she had lived with the family, she apparently was not trusted by them. When Boselli disappeared from Spawn Ranch in early August, no one would tell her where he had gone. Only after several weeks did she learn he had been arrested, and much later that he had been charged with the murder of Gary Hinman. Questioned about the murder, Kitty said she had heard that Manson had sent Boselli and a girl named Susan Atkins to Hinman's home to get money from him. A fight had ensued, and Hinman had been killed. Kitty couldn't recall who told her this, just that it was the talk at the ranch. She did recall, however, another conversation in which Susan Atkins told her and several other girls that she had been in a fight with a man who had pulled her hair and that she had stabbed him 3 or 4 times in the legs. Susan Atkins has been arrested in the Barker raid and booked under the name Sadie Mae Glutz. She was still in custody. On October 13th, the day after they talked to Kitty, Sergeants Whiteley and Gunther questioned her. She told them that she and Bobby were sent to Gary Hinman's house to get some money he had supposedly inherited. When he wouldn't give it to them, Bobby pulled out a knife and slashed Hinman's face. For 2 days and 2 nights, the pair had taken turns sleeping so Hinman wouldn't escape. Then, on their last evening at the residence, while she was in the kitchen, she heard Gary say, "Don't, Bobby." Hinman then staggered into the kitchen, bleeding from a chest wound. Even after this, Hinman didn't die. After wiping the house of prints, not effectively since both a palm print and a fingerprint belonging to Bobby were found, they were going out the front door when they heard Hinman moaning. Bobby went back in, and she heard Gary cry out, "Oh no, Bobby, please don't." She also heard a sound like gurgling, as when people are dying. 17, Lola. Yes, Brittany's right. Bobby then hotwired Hinman's 1965 Volkswagen bus, and they drove back to Spawn Ranch. Whitley and Gunther asked Susan if she would repeat her statement on tape. She declined. She was transported to the San Dismas Sheriff's Station, where she was booked for suspicion for murder. Susan Atkins' statement, unlike that of Kitty, did not implicate Manson in the Hinman murder. Nor, contrary to what Kitty had said, did Susan admit to having stabbed anyone. Whitley and Gunther strongly suspected she was telling only what she thought they already knew. Yeah, same here, Lola, because yeah, exactly. I'm surprised that the law wasn't more involved with the underage girl pregnant by an older man. Yes. This was in 1969, Alberta. Yeah, just whatever. You don't even have to ask me. I'll have to read probably to find the answer, but Brittany's knows everything. Do you want to come up in case there's more questions, Britt? And just tell me when to pause and stuff? You are more than welcome, my dear. Nor were the two LaBianca detectives very impressed. Hinman had been close to the Manson family. Several of its members, including Bobby, Atkins, even Manson himself, had lived with him at various times in the past. In short, there was a link. But there was no evidence that Manson or any of his followers knew the LaBiancas or the people at 10050 Cielo Drive. Still, it was a lead, and they proceeded to check it out. Kitty had been released into custody of her parents, who had the local address, and they interviewed her there. From LASO, county officials, Manson's parole officer, and others, they began assembling names, descriptions, and fingerprints of persons known to belong to or associate with the family. Kitty had mentioned that while the family was still living at Spawn, Manson had tried to enlist a motorcycle gang, the Straight Satans, as his personal bodyguard. Wow. With the exception of one biker named Danny, the group had laughed at Manson. Danny had stuck around for several months. On learning that the motorcycle gang hung out in Venice, California, the LaBianca detectives asked Venice PD if they could locate a straight Satan named Danny. Something in Kitty's statement puzzled Whitley and Gunther. At first, they thought it was just a discrepancy, but then they got to wondering. According to Kitty, Susan Atkins had admitted stabbing a man 3 or 4 times in his legs. Gary Hinman hadn't been stabbed in the legs. But Wojciech had, although rebuffed once before on October 20th, the sheriff's deputies again contacted the Tate detectives at LAPD, telling them what they had learned. It is possible to measure the Tate detectives' interest with some exactness. Not until October 31st, 11 days later, did they interview Kitty. November 1st to the 12th, 1969. November was a month for confessions, which initially no one believed. After being booked for the Hinman murder, Susan Denise Atkins, aka Sadie Mae Glutz, police shorthand for also known as, means true name, was moved to Sybil Brand Institute, the women's house of detention in Los Angeles. On November 1st, after completing orientation, she was assigned to dormitory 8000 and given a bunk opposite one Ronnie Howard. Miss Howard, a buxom former call girl who over her 30 years had been known by more than a dozen and a half aliases, was at present awaiting trial on a charge of forging a prescription. Your mom was a baby when this happened? My mom was born in 62. So I wasn't even thought of. Brittany, do you know if Susan Atkins is still in jail? I know one died of cancer. One is still in there. I just don't know which names. Brittany will tell us. On the same day Susan moved into dormitory 8000, one Virginia Graham did also. Miss Graham, herself an ex-call girl with a sizable number of AKAs, had been picked up for violating her parole. Although they hadn't seen each other for 5 years, Ronnie and Virginia had not only been friends and business associates in the past, going out on calls together, but Ronnie had married Virginia's ex-husband. Susan died of brain cancer. That was okay, so she's the one that did pass away. Okay. No, they were not at the same house, Nancy. It was two different murders in two different houses and two different times. It was one after the other. I believe Tate's were first, and then it was the next night that was LaBianca's. As their work assignments, Susan Atkins and Virginia Graham were given jobs as runners, carrying messages for the prison authorities. In the slow periods when there wasn't much work, they would sit on stools and control the message center and talk. At night, after lights out, Ronnie Howard and Susan talked also. Susan loved to talk, and Ronnie and Virginia proved rapt listeners. On November 2nd, 1969, one Steve appeared at the Portland, Oregon Police Department and told Detective Sergeant Richard that a Charlie and a Clem had committed both the Tate and LaBianca murders. He had heard this. The 19-year-old, what's his name? Steve. The 19-year-old Steve said from Ed Bailey and Vern Plumley, two hippie types from California whom he had met in Portland. Zabriskie also told Richard and Charlie and Clem were at present in custody in Los Angeles on another charge, grand theft auto. Bailey had told him something else, Zabriskie said, that he had personally seen Charlie shoot a man in the head with a .45 caliber automatic. This had occurred in Death Valley. Sergeant Richard asked him if he could prove any of this. He admitted he couldn't. However, his brother-in-law, Michael Lloyd Carter, had also been present during the conversations and would back him up if Sergeant Richard wanted to talk to him. Sergeant Richard didn't. Since he did not have last names, nor did he have anything concrete to establish if he was telling the truth, Sergeant Richard, according to the official report, did not place any credence on the interview and did not notify the Los Angeles Police Department. The girls in dormitory 8000 called Sadie Mae Glutz, as Susan Atkins insisted on being known, Crazy Sadie. It wasn't just that ridiculous name. She was much too happy considering where she was. She would laugh and sing at inappropriate times. Without warning, she would stop whatever she happened to be doing and start go-go dancing. She did her exercises sans underpants. She bragged that she had done everything sexual that could be done, and on more than one occasion, propositioned other inmates. Virginia Graham thought she was sort of a little girl lost, putting on a big act so no one would know how frightened she really was. One day, while they were sitting in the message center, Virginia asked her, "What are you in for?" "First-degree murder," Susan matter-of-factly replied. Virginia couldn't believe it. Susan looked so young. In this particular conversation, which apparently took place on November 3rd, Susan said that little about the murder itself, only that she felt a co-defendant, a boy who was being held in county jail, had squealed on her. In questioning Susan, Whiteley and Gunther hadn't told her that it was Kitty who had implicated her, and she presumed the snitch was Bobby. The next day, Susan told Virginia that the man she was accused of killing was named Gary Hinman. She said that she, Bobby, and another girl were involved. The other girl hadn't been charged with the murder, she said, though she had been in civil brand not too long ago on another charge. Right now, she was out on bail and had gone to Wisconsin to get her baby. She was referring to Mary Brunner, first member of the family who had had a child by Manson. At this time, the police were unaware of her involvement in the Hinman homicide. Virginia asked her, "Well, did you do it?" Susan looked at her and smiled and said, "Sure," just like that. "Only the police had it wrong," she said. "They had her holding the man while the boy stabbed him, which was silly because she couldn't hold a big man like that. It was the other way around. The boy, excuse me, the boy held him and she had stabbed him 4 or 5 times." What stunned Virginia, she would say later, was that Susan described it just like it was a perfectly natural thing to do every day of the week. Susan's conversations were not limited to murder. Subjects ranged from psychic phenomenon to her experiences as a topless dancer in San Francisco. It was while there, she told Virginia, that she met a man, this Charlie. He was the strongest man alive. He had been in prison but had never been broken. Susan said she followed his orders without question. They all did. All the kids who lived with him. He was their father, their leader, their love. It was Charlie, she said, who had given her the name Sadie Mae Glutz. Virginia remarked that she didn't consider that much of a favor. Charlie was going to lead them to the desert, Susan said. There was a hole in Death Valley. Only Charlie knew where it was, but deep down inside, in the center of the earth, there was a whole civilization, and Charlie was going to take the family, the chosen few, and they were going to go to this bottomless pit and live there. Charlie, Susan confided to Virginia, was Jesus Christ. Susan, Virginia decided, was nuts. Bless you. Thank you. On the night of Wednesday, November 5th, a young man who might have been able to provide a solution to the Tate LaBianca homicides ceased to exist. At 7:35 p.m., officers from Venice PD responded to a telephone call, arrived at 28 Clubhouse Avenue, a house near the beach rented by Mark Ross. They found a youth approximate age 22, nicknamed Zero, true name unknown, lying on a mattress on the floor in the bedroom. Deceased was still warm to the touch. There was blood on the pillow and what appeared to be an entrance wound in the right temple. Next to the body was a leather gun case and an 8-shot 22 caliber Iver and Johnson revolver. According to the other persons present, a man and 3 girls, Zero had killed himself while playing Russian roulette. The stories of the witnesses, who identified themselves as Bruce Davis, Linda Baldwin, Sue Bartell, and Catherine Giles, and who said they had been staying at the house while Ross was away, tallied perfectly. Linda Baldwin stated that she had been lying on the right side of the mattress, Zero on the left side, when Zero noticed the leather case in a stand next to the bed and remarked, "Oh, here's a gun." He removed the gun from the case. Miss Baldwin said, commenting, "There's only one bullet in it." Holding the gun in his right hand, he had then spun the cylinder, placed the muzzle against his right temple, and pulled the trigger. He was one scary SOB, Alberta. I have to agree. Like, there's a lot of things in this book I don't know at all. I mean, I'm learning a lot, and I'm only 120 pages in. The others in various parts of the house had heard what sounded like a firecracker popping. They said when they entered the bedroom, Miss Baldwin told them, Zero shot himself, just like in the movies. Bruce Davis admitted he picked up the gun. They had then called the police. The officers were unaware that all those present were members of the Manson family, who had been living at the Venice residence since their release following the Barker Ranch raid. Since when questioned separately, all told essentially the same story. The police accepted the Russian roulette explanation and listed the cause of death as suicide. They had several very good reasons to suspect that explanation, although apparently no one did. When Officer Jerome Bowen later dusted the gun for Layton's, he found no prints, nor were there prints on the leather gun case. And when they examined the revolver, they found that Zero had really been bucking the odds. The gun contained 7 live rounds and 1 spent shell. It had been fully loaded with no empty chambers. A number of family members, including Manson himself, were still in jail in Independence. On November 6th, LaBianca detectives Patchett and Starchucci, accompanied by Lieutenant Burdick of SID, went there to interview them. He was married twice, Charlie was. See, I didn't even know that. Patchett asked Manson if he knew anything about either the Tate or LaBianca homicides. Manson replied no, and that was that. Patchett was so impressed with Manson that he didn't even bother to write up a report on the interview. Holy. Of the 9 family members the detectives talked to, only one rated a memorandum. About 1:30 that afternoon, Lieutenant Burdick interviewed a girl who had been booked under the name Leslie Sankston. During this conversation, Burdick noted, I inquired of Miss Sangston if she was aware that Sadie, Susan Atkins, was reportedly involved in the Gary Hinman homicide. She replied that she was. I inquired if she was aware of the Tate and LaBianca homicides. She indicated that she was aware of the Tate homicide, but seemed unfamiliar with the LaBianca homicide. I asked her if she had any knowledge of persons in her group who might possibly be involved in either the Tate or LaBianca homicides. She indicated that there were some things that caused her to believe someone from her group might be involved in the Tate homicide. I asked her to elaborate on the things, but she declined to indicate what she meant and stated that she wanted to think about it overnight and that she was perplexed and didn't know what to do. She did indicate she might tell me the following day. However, when Burdick again questioned her the next morning, she stated she had decided she did not want to say any more about the subject and the conversation was terminated. Though the interviews yielded nothing, the LaBianca detectives did pick up one possible lead. Before leaving Independence, Patchett asked to see Manson's personal effects. Going through the clothing Manson had been wearing when arrested, Patchett noticed that he used leather thongs, both as laces in his moccasins and in the stitching of his trousers. Patchett took a sample thong from each back to Los Angeles for comparison with the thong used to tie Lino LaBianca's hands. A leather thong is a leather thong, SID and Everett told him. Though the thongs were similar, there was no way to tell whether they had come from the same piece of leather. LAPD and LASO have no monopoly on jealousy. To a certain extent, it exists between almost all law enforcement agencies and even within some. The Homicide Division of the Los Angeles Police Department is a single room, 318, on the third floor of Parker Center. Although it is a large room, rectangular in shape, there are no partitions. Only two long tables, all the detectives working at either one or the other. The distance between the Tate and LaBianca detectives was only a few feet. Yeah, I don't know what a thong is. I don't know if anybody... I mean, I know underwear-wise, but I don't know what it means, what they're trying to describe. I was trying not to laugh because I just thought of him wearing a thong. But there are psychological as well as physical distances, and, as noted, while the Tate detectives were largely the old guard, the LaBianca detectives were for the most part the young upstarts. Also, there was apparently some residual bitterness stemming from the fact that several of the latter, rather than the former, have been assigned to LA's last big publicity case. Sirhan's assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy, in short, there was a certain amount of jealousy involved and a certain lack of communication. I don't know who the hell would wear a leather thong either, if that's what they're talking about. Really? Oh my God. Can you imagine the sweat? Ugh. Lola, usually Mare puts them all through my stream, and she also puts them under, she'll put them underneath the video as well, too, in the comments section. I'm just going to turn my air off. I was so sweaty earlier when I mowed my lawn that I had a shower and I had my air on just right now to kind of cool me down. Now I'm kind of cold. As a result, none of the LaBianca detectives walked those few feet to tell the Tate detectives that they were following a lead which might connect the two homicides. See, that pisses me off. There they are, right there in the same setting, literally, like they just said, 2 feet apart, and not one of them will let their pride go and try and communicate. That just pisses me off. No one informed Lieutenant Helter, who was in charge of the Tate investigation, that they had gone to Independence and interviewed one Charles Manson, who was believed involved in a strikingly similar murder, or that while one of his followers, a girl who went by the name of Leslie, had admitted that someone in their group might be involved in the Tate homicides. The LaBianca detectives continued to go it on their own. Pretty. That would be so... Oh my God. Sorry, I couldn't do thongs. Never did like clothes that climb to the crack. Oh my God. Right, Alberta? I just took a sip of mine too, but I had swallowed, thankfully. Had Leslie True, named Leslie Van Houten, yielded to that impulse to talk, she could have told detectives a great deal about the Tate murders, but even more about the La Bianca slayings. But by this time, Susan Atkins was already doing enough talking for both of them. On Thursday, November 6th at about 4:45 p.m., Susan had walked over to Virginia Graham's bed and sat down. They had finished work for the day, and Susan/Sadie was in a talkative mood. She began rapping about the LSD trips she had taken, karma, good and bad vibrations, and the Hinman murder. Virginia cautioned her that she shouldn't be talking so much. She knew a man who had been convicted just on what he told the cellmate. Susan replied, "Oh, I know. I haven't talked about it to anyone else. You know, I can look at you and there's something about you. I know you, I can tell you things." Also, she wasn't worried about the police. They weren't all that good, you know. There's a case right now and they're so far off track, they don't even know what's happening. Virginia asked, "What are you talking about?" "That one on Benedict Canyon." "Benedict Canyon? You don't mean Sharon Tate?" "Yeah." With this, Susan seemed to get very excited. The words came out in a rush. "You know who did it, don't you?" "No." "Well, you're looking at her." Virginia gasped. "You've got to be kidding me." Susan just smiled and said, "Uh-huh." The Atkins Graham Howard conversations have been taken from LAPD's taped interviews with Virginia Graham and Ronnie Howard, my interviews with both and their trial testimony, and my interview with Susan Atkins. There are, of course, minor variations in wording. Major discrepancies will be noted. Later, Virginia Graham. Oh, wait. Where's that one? There's all these little asterisks everywhere. I'm trying to follow. Later, Virginia Graham would be unable to remember exactly how long they had talked. She would estimate it as being between 35 minutes and an hour, maybe longer. She would also admit confusion as to whether some details were discussed that afternoon or in subsequent conversations, and the order in which some topics came up. But the content she remembered, that she would say she would never forget as long as she lived. She asked the big question first. "Why, Sadie? Why?" "Because," Susan replied, "we wanted to do a crime that would shock the world, that the world would have to stand up and take notice." "But why the Tate House?" Susan's answer was chilling in its simplicity. "It is isolated." The place had been picked at random. They had known the owner, Terry Melcher. Virginia Graham had seen the owner of the house, Rudy, interviewed on TV, and although she couldn't remember his name, she knew it wasn't Terry Melcher. This was one reason why, initially, she was inclined to disbelieve Susan Atkins' story. Susan, however, insisted Melcher was the owner, apparently believing he was. Doris Day's son from, okay, so Terry Melcher, Doris Day's son from about a year back, but they didn't know who would be there, and it didn't matter. One person or 10, they had gone there prepared to do everybody in. In other words, Virginia asked, "You didn't know Jay Sebring or any of the other people?" "No," Susan replied. "Do you mind me asking questions? I mean, I'm curious." Susan didn't mind. She told Virginia that she had known brown eyes, and if you look through a person's eyes, you can see the soul. Virginia told Susan she wanted to know exactly how it had come down. "I'm dying of curiosity," she added. Susan obliged. Before leaving the ranch, Charlie had given them instructions. They had worn dark clothing. They also brought along a change of clothes in the car. They drove up to the gate. Then they drove back down to the bottom of the hill, parked the car, and walked back up. Virginia interrupted. "Then it wasn't just you?" "Oh, no," Susan told her. "There were 4 of us." In addition to herself, there were 2 other girls and a man. When they reached the gate, Susan continued, "He cut the telephone wires." Virginia again interrupted to ask whether he wasn't worried he'd cut the electrical wires, extinguishing the lights and alerting the people that something was wrong. Susan replied, "Oh, no, he knew just what to do." Virginia got the impression, less from her words than from the way she said them, that the man had been there before. Lola. The next book should be Canadian. I was actually thinking about doing Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka because a lot of people don't really know that. Or actually, yes, Robert Picton, the pig farmer. One of those two. We can do a Canadian one after this for sure. Susan didn't mention how they got past the gate. She said that they had killed the boy first. When Virginia asked why, Susan replied that he had seen them, and he had to shoot him. He was shot 4 times. At this point, Virginia became somewhat confused. Later, she would state, I think she told me, I'm not positive, I think she said that this Charles shot him. Earlier, Virginia had got the impression that although Charlie had instructed them what to do, he hadn't come along, but now it appeared he had. No, I won't do that one, Lola, because I'm telling you right now, it wasn't just that I can't handle the animal stuff, but what he did to that boy, oh my God. No, I can't do it. I'm sorry. I ain't doing that one. That guy is one scary piece of shit. What Virginia didn't know was that there were two men named Charles in the family. Charles Manson and Charles Tex Watson. The complications this simple misunderstanding would later cause would be immense. It's okay. I keep getting off track anyways, Lola. It's fine. On entering the house, Susan didn't say how they got in. They saw a man on the couch in the living room and a girl whom Susan identified as Anne Folger, sitting in a chair reading a book. She didn't look up. Virginia asked her how she knew their names. We didn't, Susan replied. Not until the next day. At some point, the group apparently split up. Susan going on to the bedroom, while the others stayed in the living room. Sharon was sitting up in bed. Jay was sitting on the edge of the bed talking to Sharon. Oh, really? Virginia asked. What did she have on? She had on a bikini bra and panties. You're kidding, and she was pregnant? Yeah. And they looked up, and they were surprised. Wow, wasn't there some kind of big hassle? No, they were too surprised, and they knew we meant business. Susan skipped on. It was as if she was tripping out, jumping abruptly from one subject to another. Suddenly they were in the living room, and Sharon and Jay were strung up with nooses around their necks. So if they tried to move, they would choke. Sorry, trigger warning, guys. Oh, that bastard. Oh, he's from Montreal. I cannot think of the name, but there was a movie on Netflix, and it was called Don't Fuck with Cats. That dickhead. But he did more than that. It was horrible. Virginia asked why they put a hood over Sebring's head. We didn't put any hood over his head, Susan corrected her. That's what the paper said, Sadie. Well, there wasn't any hood, Susan reiterated, getting quite insistent about it. Yes, Lola, she was. Yeah, a baby boy. Right, Alberta? I keep reading she scares the shit out of me. Then the other man, Frykowski, broke and ran for the door. He was full of blood, Susan said, and she stabbed him 3 or 4 times. He was bleeding, and he ran to the front part, out the door and onto the lawn. And would you believe that he was there hollering, help, help, somebody please help me, and nobody came? Wow. Bluntly, without elaboration, then we finished him off. Virginia wasn't asking any questions now. What had begun as a little girl's fairy tale had become a horror-filled nightmare. There was no mention of what had happened to Abigail Folger or Jay Sebring, only that Sharon was the last to die. On saying this, Susan laughed. What a sick and twisted bitch. Hey, Teresa. Susan said that she had held Sharon's arms behind her and that Sharon looked at her. I'm sorry, this is trauma. This is where it's too much. Trigger warning, big time. She is a one heart, yeah. Jesus. Susan said that she had held Sharon's arm behind her and that Sharon looked at her and was crying and begging, please don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I don't want to die. I want to live. I want to have my baby. I want to have my baby. Susan said she looked Sharon straight in the eye and said, look, bitch, I don't care about you. I don't care if you're going to have a baby. You had better be ready. You're going to die, and I don't feel anything about it. Holy shit. Thanks, Brittany. Thanks, Lola. Then Susan said in a few minutes, I killed her and she was dead. That is so cold and disgusting. Oh my God. Like, I know that happened, but it's really hard to keep reading it. Okay, Alberta. After killing Sharon, Susan noticed there was blood on her hand. She tasted it. Wow, oh my God. Wow, what a trip, she told Virginia. I thought to taste death and yet give life. Had she ever tasted blood? She asked Virginia. It's warm and sticky and nice. Holy shit. Virginia managed to ask a question. Hadn't it bothered her to kill Sharon Tate with her pregnant? Susan looked at Virginia quizzically and said, well, I thought you understood. I loved her, and in order for me to kill her, I was killing part of myself when I killed her. What? I'm going to read that again. Well, I thought you understood. I loved her, so I'm assuming Susan is referring to Sharon Tate. I loved her, and in order for me to kill her, I was killing part of myself when I killed her. That is really screwed up. Virginia replied, oh, yeah, I do understand. She had, she had wanted to cut out the baby, Susan said, but there hadn't been time. They wanted to take out the eyes of the holy frig. They wanted to take out the eyes of the people and squash them against the walls and cut off their fingers. We were going to mutilate them, but we didn't have a chance to. It is hard to read. I didn't know all of it. Oh my God. Virginia asked how she felt after the murders. Susan replied, I felt so elated, tired, but at peace with myself. I knew this was just the beginning of Helter Skelter. Now the world would listen. Wow. Virginia didn't understand what she meant by Helter Skelter, and Susan tried to explain it to her. However, she talked so quickly and with such obvious excitement that Virginia had trouble following. As Virginia understood it, there was this group, these chosen people, that Charlie had brought together, and they were elected, the new society, to go out all over the country and all over the world to pick out people at random and execute them, to release them from this earth. You have to have a real love in your heart to do this for people, Susan explained. So basically, they were running around trying to play God, thinking they're doing something good. Are they're insane. 4 or 5 times while Susan was talking, Virginia had to caution her to keep her voice down, that someone might hear her. Susan smiled and said she wasn't worried about that. She was very good at playing crazy. After they'd left the Tate residence, Susan continued. She discovered that she had lost her knife. She thought maybe the dog had got it. You know how dogs are sometimes. They had thought about going back to look for it, but had decided against it. She had also left her handprint on a desk. It dawned on me afterwards, Susan said, but my spirit was so strong that obviously it didn't even show up, or they would have had me by now. Holy frig. As Virginia understood it, after leaving the Tate residence, they had apparently changed clothes in the car. Then they had driven some distance, stopping at a place where there was a fountain or water outside to wash their hands. Susan said a man came out and wanted to know what they were doing. He started to holler at them, and Susan asked, guess who he was? I don't know, Virginia replied. It was the sheriff of Beverly Hills. Wow. Virginia said she didn't think Beverly Hills had a sheriff. Well, Susan said, the sheriff or mayor or something. The man had started to reach out into the car to grab the keys, and Charlie turned on the key. Boy, we made it. We laughed all the way, Susan said, adding, if he had only known. For a moment, Susan remained silent. Then, with her little girl's smile, she asked, you know the other two the next night? Virginia flashed on the grocery store owner and his wife, the LaBiancas. Yeah, she said. Was that you? Susan winked and said, what do you think? But that's part of the plan, she continued, and there's more. But Virginia had heard enough for the day. She excused herself to go take a shower. Virginia would later recall thinking, she's got to be kidding. She's making all this up. This is just too wild, too fantastic. But then she remembered what Susan was in for, first-degree murder. Virginia decided to not say anything to anyone. It was just too incredible. She also decided, if possible, to avoid Susan. I would do. The following day, however, Virginia walked over to Ronnie Howard's bed to tell her something. Susan, who was lying on her own bed, interrupted. Virginia, Virginia, remember that beautiful cat I was telling you about? I want you to dig on his name. Now listen, his name is Manson. Man's son. She repeated it several times to make sure Virginia understood. She said it in a tone of a childlike wonder. She just couldn't keep it to herself any longer. It was just too much. The first time she and Ronnie Howard were alone together, Virginia Graham told her what Susan Atkins had said. Hey, what do you do? She asked Ronnie. If this is true, my God, this is terrible. I wish she hadn't told me. Ronnie thought Sadie was making it all up. She could have gotten it out of the papers. I believe so, that he was racist, yes. That's what he was trying to do, start a race war. The only way to know for sure, they decided, would be for Virginia to question her further, to see if she could learn something that only one of the killers would know. Virginia had an idea on how she could do this without arousing Susan's suspicions. Though she had mentioned it to Susan Atkins, Virginia Graham had more than a passing interest in the Tate homicides. She had known Jay Sebring, a girlfriend who was working as a manicurist for Sebring, had introduced them at Lao some years ago, shortly after Sebring opened his shop in Fairfax. It was a casual thing. He was neither client nor friend, just someone you'd nod and say hi to at a party or in a restaurant. It was an odd coincidence, Susan coping out to her. But there was another coincidence even odder. Virginia had been to 150 Cielo Drive back in 1962. She and her then husband and another girl had been looking for a quiet place, away from things, and had learned that 10050 Cielo Drive was up for lease. There had been no one there to show them around, so they just had a look in the windows of the main house. She could remember little about it, only that it looked like a red barn. But the next day, at lunch, she told Susan about having been there and asked if the interior was still decorated in gold and white. It was just, I guess, Susan replied. But didn't elaborate. Virginia then told her about knowing Sebring, but Susan didn't appear very interested. This time Susan wasn't as talkative, but Virginia persisted, picking up miscellaneous bits and pieces of information. They'd met Terry Melcher through Dennis Wilson, one of the Beach Boys rock group. They, Charlie, Susan, and the others, had lived with Dennis for a time. Virginia got the idea that they were hostile toward Melcher, that he was too interested in money. Virginia also learned that the Tate murders had taken place between midnight and 1 a.m, that Charlie is love, pure love, and that when you stab someone, it feels good when the knife goes in. She also learned that besides the Hinman, Tate, and LaBianca murders, there's more and more before. There's also 3 people out in the desert. Bits and pieces, Susan had said nothing that would establish whether she was or wasn't telling the truth. This afternoon, Susan walked over and sat down on Virginia's bed. Virginia had been leafing through a movie magazine. Susan saw it and began talking. The story she related, Virginia would say much later, was even more bizarre than what Susan had already told her. It was so incredible that Virginia didn't even mention it to Ronnie Howard. No one would believe it, she decided. For Susan Atkins, in one spurt of nonstop talking, gave her a death list of persons who would be murdered next. All were celebrities. She then, according to Virginia, described in gruesome detail exactly how Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Tom Jones, Steve McQueen, and Frank Sinatra would die. I didn't know about all that. A very sick and twisted individual, I would assume, Lola. Somebody who just doesn't have a heart. Somebody who has something wrong with their brain, like what is it? Like they, not necessarily a narcissist, but homicidal tendencies. They have it where they don't feel that. They don't feel love. I know, same here. I'm so glad they didn't. On Monday, November 10th, Susan Atkins had a visitor at Sybil Brand, Sue Bartell, who told her about the death of Zero. After Sue left, Susan told Ronnie Howard. Whether she embellished it or not is unknown. According to Susan, one of the girls had been holding Zero's hand when he died. When the gun went off, he climaxed all over himself. Oh my God. Susan didn't seem disturbed to hear of Zero's death. On the contrary, it excited her. Imagine how beautiful to be there when it happened, she told Ronnie. On Wednesday, November 12th, Susan Atkins was taken to court for a preliminary hearing on the Hinman murder. While there, she heard Sergeant Whitley testify that it was Kitty, not Bobby, who had implicated her. On being returned to jail, Susan told Virginia that the prosecution had a surprise witness, but she wasn't worried about her testimony. Her life's not worth anything. Oh, nice. That same day, Virginia Graham received some bad news. She was being transferred to Corona Women's Prison to serve out the rest of her sentence. She was to leave that afternoon. While she was packing, Ronnie came up to her and asked, "What do you think?" "I don't know," Virginia replied. "Ronnie, if you want to take it from here." "I've been talking to that girl every night," Ronnie said. "Boy, she's really weird. She could have. Virginia had forgotten to ask Susan about the word pig, which the papers had said was printed in blood on the door of the Tate's residence. She suggested that Ronnie question her about this and anything else she could think of that might indicate whether she was telling the truth. In the meantime, they decided not to mention it to anyone else. That same day, the LaBianca detectives received a call from Venice PD. Were they still interested in talking to one of the straight Satans? If so, they were questioning a guy named Al Springer, on another charge. The LaBianca detectives had Springer brought over to Parker Center, where they interviewed him on tape. What he told them was so unexpected that they had trouble believing it. For Springer said that on August 11th or the 12th, 2 or 3 days after the Tate homicides, Charlie Manson had bragged to him about killing people, adding, "We knocked off 5 of them just the other night." LaBianca detectives Nielsen and Patchett interviewed Springer on tape. In one of the interrogation cubicles of LAPD homicide, Springer was 26, 5 feet 9, weighed 130 pounds, and except for his dusty, ragged colors, as bikers' jackets are known, was surprisingly neat for a member of an outlaw motorcycle brand. Springer, it turned out, prided himself on his cleanliness, which was one of the reasons he personally hadn't wanted to have anything to do with Manson and his girls, he said. But Danny DiCarlo, the club treasurer of the Straight Satans, had got mixed up with them and had missed meetings. So around August 11th or the 12th, Springer, had gone to Spawn Ranch to persuade Danny to come back. And there was flies all over the place, and they were just like animals up there. I couldn't believe it, You see, I'm really clean, really. Some of the guys get pretty nasty, but I like to keep things clean. Well, in comes this Charlie. He wanted Danny up there because Danny had his colors on his back, and all these drunkards, they came up there and started harassing the girls and messing with the guys, and Danny walks out with his straight Satan colors on, and nobody messes with Charlie, see? So I tried to get Danny to come back, and Charlie is standing there, and Charlie says, "Now wait a minute, maybe I can give you a better thing than you've already got." I said, "What's that?" He says, "Move up here. You can have all the girls you want. All the girls," he says, are all yours, at your disposal, anything. And he's a brainwashing type guy. So I said, "Well, how do you survive? How do you support these 20, 30 fucking broads, man?" And he says, "I got them all hoofing for me." He said, "I go out at night and I do my thing." "Well," I said, "what's your thing, man? Run your trip down." He figured, me being a motorcycle rider and all, I'd accept anything, including murder. Jeez. So he starts getting in my ear and says how he goes up and he lives with the rich people and he calls the police pigs and whatnot. He knocks on the door, they'll open the door, and he just drive in with his cutlass and start cutting them up, see? "This is what he told you?" "This is what he told me verbally, right to my face." "You're kidding. Is that what you really heard?" "Yeah," I said. "When's the last time you did it?" He says. "Well, we knocked them," he says, "just the other night." "So he told you that." Charlie stated that he knocked over 5 people. Right, Charlie and Tex. Springer couldn't recall the exact word Manson used. It wasn't people. It might have been pigs or rich pigs. The LaBianca detectives were so startled that they had Springer run through it a second time and a third. "I think you got your man right here. I really do. I'm pretty sure we have, but in this day and age of feeding people their rights, if we're going to make a decent case on him, we can't do it with his statement." Exactly when had Manson told him this? Well, it was the first time he went to Spawn, and that was either August 11th or the 12th. He couldn't remember which, but he sure remembered the scene. I had never seen anything like it in my life. I've never been to a nudist colony, or I've never seen real idiots on the loose. Everywhere he looked, there were naked girls. Maybe 12 were of age, 18 or over, but about an equal number weren't. The young ones were hiding in the bushes. Charlie had told them he could have his pick. He also offered to buy him a dune buggy and a new motorcycle if he would stay. It was true turnabout. Charlie Manson, aka Jesus Christ, trying to tempt a straight Satan. That Springer resisted the temptation may have been due in part to his knowledge that other members of his gang had been there on previous occasions. Everybody got sick of catching the clap. The ranch was just out of hand. During Springer's first visit, Manson had demonstrated his prowess with knives, in particular a long sword. Springer had seen Charlie throw it maybe 50 feet, sticking it, say, 8 times out of 10. This was the sword Springer said that Charlie used when he put the chop to people. Did you ever get a corpse with his ear cut off? Springer abruptly asked. Apparently, one of the detectives nodded as Springer said, Yeah, there's your man. Charlie had told him about cutting some guy's ear off. If Danny would come in, he could tell him about it. The only problem was Danny's scared of these creeps. They've tried to kill him already. Springer had also mentioned a Tex and a Clem. The detectives asked him to describe them. I'm going to butcher the author, but it's Vincent Buglosi. That's still wrong. Belosi. That's it. Vincent Belosi. Something like that. Clem was a certified idiot, Springer said. He was an escapee from Camilla, never mind, I'm not going to say it, a state mental hospital. Whatever Charlie said, Clem would parrot it. As far as he could tell, Charlie and Tex are the ones that had the brains out there. Unlike Clem, Tex didn't say much. He kept his mouth shut, real tight. He was real clean cut, his hair was a little long, but he was just like a college student. Tex seemed to spend most of his time working on dune buggies. Charlie had a thing about dune buggies. He wanted to fix them with a switch on the dash that would turn the taillights off. Then, when the CHP, California Highway Patrol, pulled them over to sight them, there would be 2 guys armed with shotguns in the back, and the CHPs came up alongside, pow, blow them up. Oh my God. Why did he say he wanted to do that? He wants to build up a thing where he can be leader of the world. He's crazy. Does he have a name for this group? The Family. I didn't butcher it? Okay, good. Back to that sword, could Springer describe it? Yeah, it was a cutlass, a real pirate sword. Up until a few months ago, Springer said it had belonged to an ex-president of the Street Satans, but then it had disappeared, and he guessed one of the members had given it to Charlie. He had heard from Danny that the sword had been used when they had killed a guy called Henlon, I believe it was. This was the guy who had his ear cut off. What did he know about the Henlon killing, they asked. According to Danny, a guy named Bosley and 1 or 2 other guys had killed him, Springer said. Danny had told him that, almost beyond a reasonable doubt, he could prove that Bosley or whatever killed this guy, and evidently Charlie was in on it or something. Well, anyway, somebody cut his ear. Clem had also told him, Springer, how they cut some fucking idiot's ear off and wrote on the wall and put the Panther's hand or paw up there to blame the Panthers. Everything they did, they blamed on, I'm not saying that, the N-word, see? They hate the N-word because they had killed an N-word prior to that. 5 plus Hinman, plus an N-word, total thus far 7. The detectives were keeping track. Had he seen any other weapons while at Spawn? Yeah, Charlie had shown him a whole gun rack full. The first time he went up there were shotguns, deer rifles, 45 caliber handguns, and I heard talk of and was told by Danny that they had 22 buntline long barrel, a 9-round. This came from Danny, and he knows guns, and this is what was supposed to have killed that Black Panther. Charlie had told him about it, as Al remembered it. Tex had burned this black guy in a deal for a whole bunch of grass. When Charlie refused to give back the guy's money, the Black had threatened to get all his Panther brothers up to Spawn Ranch and wipe out the place. So Charlie pulls out a gun. Nobody else was going to do it, but Charlie pulls out a gun and he points at the guy, and he goes click, 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 and the gun didn't go off 4 or 5 times. And the guy stood up and said, Ha, you come in here with an empty gun on me. And Charlie says, click, bam, in the heart area or somewhere. And he told me this personally right to my face. And that was what the bunt line was used for, the long barrel job. After the murder, which had occurred somewhere in Hollywood, the Panther's buddies took the carcass off supposedly to some park, Griffith Park or one of them. This is all hearsay, but it is hearsay right from Charlie. Now, did anybody have the refrigerator wrote on? There was a sudden silence, then one of the La Bianca detectives asked, "Why does this come up?" Because he told me something about writing something on the refrigerator. Who said he wrote it on the refrigerator? Charlie did. Charlie said they wrote something on the fucking refrigerator in blood. What did he say he wrote? Something about pigs or black people or something like that. If Springer was telling the truth, and if Manson wasn't just bragging to impress him, then it meant that Manson was probably also involved in the La Bianca murders, bringing the total thus far to 9. But the La Bianca detectives had good reason to doubt his statement. For the contrary to the press reports, death to pigs hadn't been printed in blood on the refrigerator door. The phrase had actually been printed on the living room wall, as had the word rise. What had been printed on the refrigerator door was Helter Skelter. While Springer was being questioned, one of the La Bianca detectives left the room. When he returned a few minutes later, another man was with him. "Here's another Panther, Mike McGann. Ow. Let me shove this table down here. He just came in, so you might want to bring him up on what we've talked about." McGann was one of the Tate detectives. The La Bianca detectives had finally decided to walk those few feet and share what they had learned. By this time, the temptation to say, "Hey, look what we found," must have been irresistible. They had Springer run through it again. McGann listened, unimpressed. Springer then began talking about still another murder, that of a cowboy named Shorty, whom he had met when he first visited the ranch. How and what had he heard about Shorty's death? One of the detectives asked. "I heard about that from Danny. Danny heard from the girls that Shorty got to know too much and hear too much and got worried too much, and so they just cut his arms and his legs and his head off. Danny had felt very badly about this because he had liked Shorty." Anything you want to get in on this? Yeah, I want to ask about why they killed this Panther, supposedly. When did this take place? Do you know? Springer wasn't sure, but he thought it was about a week before he went up to the ranch. Danny could probably tell them about that. Did you connect up the 5 people that Charlie said he killed in early August with any particular crime? Right, the Tate crime. You put that together. Right. I'll be right back. I have to use the phone booth, so I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. They began zeroing in. Anybody else present when Charlie supposedly confessed those 5 murders to you? No. Was Tate ever specifically mentioned? No. Did you see anyone at the ranch who wore glasses? No. Ever seen Manson with a gun? No, only a knife. He's a knife freak. Were the cutlass and the other knives you saw sharpened on both sides? He thought so, but wasn't sure. Danny had mentioned Charlie sending them out places to be sharpened. Ever see any rope up there? Yeah, they used all kinds of rope. Do you know there's a $25,000 reward on the Tate murders? Yeah, and I sure could use it. Your son, let me see. I hope you know that my son is catching the book club on the replay. Don't let these numbers fool you. MC, my kid always catches you. Really? I didn't know that. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. They're always low for this one because I think a lot of my audience like the Katie Joy stuff. The person talking to the guy is part of the that motorcycle game, Satan something or other. Springer had been to Spawn Ranch 3 times, his second visit occurring the day after his first. He lost his hat running out and had gone back to look for it, but then his bike had broken down and he had to stay overnight to repair it. Again, Charlie, Tex, and Clem had worked on him to join them. His third and last visit had taken place on the night of Friday, August 15th. The detectives were able to establish the date because it was the night before the sheriff's raid on Spawn Ranch. Also, oh, that's it. That's the name of the motorcycle group is Straight Satans. So that's who's talking to the police. So also, the Straight Satans held their club meetings on Friday, and they had discussed getting Danny away from Charlie. A lot of the guys in the club were going to go up there and beat his ass, teach him a lesson not to brainwash our members. 8 or 9 of them did go to Spawn that night, but it didn't happen that way. Charlie had conned some of them. The girls had lured others into the bushes. And when they started breaking things up, Charlie told them that he had guns trained on them from the rooftops. Springer had one of his brothers check the gun rack that Charlie had shown him on his first visit. A couple of rifles were missing. After a time, they left, in a cloud of exhaust fumes and threats, leaving one of their more sober members, Robert Reinhardt, to bring Danny back the following day. But the next morning, the police were all over the place, arresting not only Charlie and all the others, but also DeCarlo and Reinhardt. All had been released a few days later, and according to Danny, Shorty had been killed not long after this. Fearing he would be next, Danny had taken his truck and split to Venice. Late one night, Clem and Bruce Davis, another of Charlie's boys, had snuck up on the truck. They had succeeded in prying open the door when Danny heard them and grabbed his .45. Danny felt sure Springer said that they had come to off him, and he was scared now, not only for himself, but because his little boy was living with him. Springer thought Danny was frightened enough to talk to them. Danny to the Venice detectives would be no problem, since he's known them most of his life. But getting him to come down to the Parker Center was something else. Springer, however, promised he'd try to get Danny to come in voluntarily, if possible, the next day. Springer didn't have a phone. The detectives asked if there was somewhere they could call without putting any heat on you. Is there some gal you see quite a bit? Just my wife and kids. The clean, neat, monogamous Springer didn't conform to the stereotype of a biker. As one of the detectives remarked, you're going to give the motorcycle gang a whole new image in the world. Yeah, a lot of people, I from what I understand, are getting worn out, like you say, exactly, of all the KJ stuff. My whole channel wasn't supposed to even be about KJ. I got into it recently, well, a few months back. But when I started my channel, it was actually about the EVPs in my house. I posted them on my channel, and I was doing true crime. And that's what my focus was. And then I got into the KJ stuff, and that's all anybody ever wanted. But so that's why I have book club now. I would like to do both because I'm interested in both. Mainly this. So I can't just let my the people who depend on me for the KJ stuff, I can't just let that go. So I'll still continue doing that as well as stuff that I like to do. Although Al Springer appeared to be telling the truth, the detectives were not greatly impressed with his story. He was an outsider, not a member of the family, yet the very first time he goes to Spawn Ranch, Manson confesses to him that he committed at least 9 murders. It just didn't make sense. It appeared far more likely that Springer was just regurgitating what Danny DeCarlo, who had been close to Manson, had told him. It was also possible that Manson, to impress the cyclist, had bragged about committing murders in which he wasn't even involved. McGann of the Tate team was so unimpressed that later he wouldn't even be able to recall having heard of Springer, much less talking to him. Although the interview had been taped, the LaBianca detectives had only one portion transcribed, and that not the section of their case, but the part, less than a page in length, with Manson's alleged confession. We knocked off 5 of them just the other night. The LaBianca detectives then filled the tape and that single page in their tubs, as police case files are known. With other developments in the case, they apparently forgot them. Yet the Springer interview of November 12, 1969 was in a sense an important turning point. 3 months after the Tate LaBianca homicides, LAPD was finally seriously considering the possibility that the two crimes were not, as had long been believed, unrelated. About frickin' time. And the focus of at least the LaBianca investigation was now on a single group of suspects, Charlie Manson and his family. It appears almost certain that had the LaBianca's detectives continued to pursue Springer DiCarlo, they would lead. They would eventually, even if uninformed of Susan Atkins' confessions, have found the killers of Stephen Parent, Abigail Folger, Wojciech, Jay Sebring, Sharon Tate, Rosemary, and Lino LaBianca. In the meantime, two people, one at Sybil Brand, the other at Corona, were each independent of the other, trying to tell someone what they knew about the killings and having no luck. There's some confusion as to what exactly what there is some confusion, as to what exactly when Susan Atkins first discussed the Tate LaBianca murders with Ronnie Howard. Whatever the date, there was a similarity in the way it came about. Susan first admitting her participation in the murder of Hinman, then in her little girl manner, attempting to surprise Ronnie with the other, more startling revelations. According to Ronnie, one evening Susan came over, sat down on her bed, and started rapping about her experiences. Susan said that she had dropped acid, taken LSD many times. In fact, she had done everything there was to do. There was nothing left. She'd reached a stage where nothing shocked her anymore. Ronnie replied that there wasn't much that would shock her either. Since age 17, when she'd been sent to federal penitentiary for 2 years for extortion, Ronnie had seen quite a lot. I bet I could tell you something that would really blow your mind, Susan said. I don't think so, Ronnie responded. You remember the Tate deal? Yes. I was there. We did it. Really? Anyone can say that. No, I'll tell you, and tell her Susan Atkins did. Susan would flash from one thought to another with such rapidity that Ronnie was often left confused. 2, Ronnie's collection of details, especially names, dates, places, was not as good as Virginia's. Later, she would be unsure, for example, exactly how many persons were involved. At one time, she thought Susan said 5. Herself, 2 other girls, Charlie, and a guy who stayed in the car. Another time it was 4, with no mention of the man in the car. She knew a girl named Katie was involved in a murder, but which murder, Hinman, Tate, or LaBianca? Ronnie wasn't sure. But she also recalled details Susan either hadn't told Virginia or Virginia had forgotten. Charlie had a gun. The girls all had knives. Charlie had cut the telephone wires, shot the boy in the car, then awakened the man on the couch, Franceschi, who looked up to see a gun pointing at his face. Sharon Tate's plea and Susan's brutal response were nearly identical in both Ronnie and Virginia's accounts. However, the description of how Sharon died differed somewhat. As Ronnie understood it, 2 other people held Sharon. Well, to quote Susan, I proceeded to stab her. It felt so good the first time I stabbed her, and when she screamed at me, it did something to me, sent a rush through me, and I stabbed her again. Ronnie asked where. Susan replied in the chest, not the stomach. How many times? I don't remember. I just kept stabbing her until she stopped screaming. Ronnie knew a little bit about the subject, having once stabbed her ex-husband. Did it feel sort of like a pillow? Yeah, Susan replied. Pleased that Ronnie understood, it was just like going into nothing, going into air. But the killing itself was something else. It's like a sexual release, Susan told her. Especially when you see the blood spurting out, it's better than a climax. Remembering Virginia's question, Ronnie asked Susan about the word pig. Susan said that she printed the word on the door after first dipping a towel in Sharon Tate's blood. At one point in the conversation, Susan asked, Don't you remember that guy that was found with the fork in his stomach? We wrote Arise and Death to Pigs and Helter, Skelter and Blood. Was that you and your same friends? Ronnie asked. No, just 3 this time. All girls? No, 2 girls and Charlie. Linda wasn't in on this one. Susan rapped on about a variety of subjects. Manson, he was both Jesus Christ and the devil, Helter Skelter. Ronnie admittedly didn't understand it, but thought it meant you have to be killed to live. Thanks, Lola. I appreciate the $5 super sticker. Okay, so She thought that it meant you have to be killed to live. Sex, the whole world is like one big intercourse. Everything is in and out. Smoking, eating, stabbing. How she would play crazy to fool the psychiatrist. All you have to do is act normal, Ronnie advised her. Children. Charlie had helped deliver her baby, whom she had named, I can't even pronounce that, Zizozos Zadfrak Glutz. Within a couple of months after his birth, she had begun, oh my God, I don't even want to read that. That bikers with the motorcycle gangs on their side, they would really throw some fear into the world and murder. Susan loved to talk about murder. The more you do it, the better you like it. Just the mention of it seemed to excite her. Laughingly, she told Ronnie about some man whose head we cut off, either out in the desert or in one of the canyons. This book is fucking disgusting. Yeah, that's what I'm reading. It's a sexual release. She also told Ronnie there are 11 murders that they will never solve, and there were going to be more, many more. Although Charlie was in jail in Indio, most of the family was still free. As Susan talked, Ronnie Howard realized that there were still some things that could shock her. One was that this little girl, who was 21 but often seemed much younger, probably had committed all these murders. Another was Susan's assertion that this was only the beginning, that more murders would follow. Ronnie Howard would later state, I've never informed on anyone in the past, but this one thing I could not go along with. I kept thinking that if I didn't say anything, these people would probably be set free. They were going to pick other houses, just at random. I just couldn't see all those innocent people being killed. It could have been my house next time, or yours, or anyone's. Ronnie decided she just had to tell the police. It would seem that if one were in jail, talking to a policeman would be relatively easy. Ronnie Howard discovered otherwise. The dates again are vague, but according to Ronnie, she told Sergeant Broom, since neither the deputy nor her lieutenant was available for interviews, therefore making it impossible to present their version of these incidents, pseudonyms have been used for both. So Sergeant Broom, one of the female deputies at Sybil Brand, that she knew who had committed the Tate and LaBianca murders, that the person who told her had been involved and was now in custody, but that the other killers were on the loose, and unless they were apprehended soon, there would be more murders. Ronnie wanted permission to call LAPD. Sergeant Broom said she would pass the request to her superior, Lieutenant Johns. After waiting 3 days and hearing nothing, Ronnie asked Sergeant Broom about the request. Lieutenant Johns didn't think there was anything to the story, the sergeant told her. By this time, the lieutenant had probably forgotten all about it. Sergeant Broom said, adding, why don't you do the same thing, Ronnie? Wow. By now, according to Ronnie, she was literally begging. People were going to die unless she warned the police in time. Could you call for me? Ronnie asked, please. It was against the rules for a guard to make a call for an inmate, Sergeant Broom informed her. Isn't that ridiculous? Yeah, she's great too. You'll like her, Lola. On Thursday, November 13th, biker Danny DiCarlo came down to Parker Center, where he was interviewed by the LaBianca detectives. It was not a long interview, and it was not taped. Although DiCarlo had a great deal of information about the activities of Manson and his group, having lived with them for more than 5 months, at no time had Charlie admitted to him that he was involved in either the Tate or the LaBianca murders. This made the officers even more skeptical about Springer's tale, and it was probably at this point that they decided to write him off as a reliable source. When Springer came back the following week, he was given some photos to identify but was asked few questions. Arrangements were made to interview DiCarlo on tape, and at length, on Monday, November 17th, he was to come in about 8:30 in the morning. Ronnie Howard kept after Sergeant Broom, who finally mentioned the subject to Lieutenant Johns a second time. The lieutenant suggested that she ask Ronnie for some details. Sergeant Broom did, and Ronnie, still without identifying the people involved, told her a little of what she had learned. The killers knew Terry Melcher. They had shot the boy, Stephen Parent, first 4 times because he saw them. Sharon Tate had been the last to die. The word pig had been written in her blood. They were going to cut out Sharon's baby, but didn't. Again, she stressed that more killings were planned. Sergeant Broom apparently misunderstood Ronnie, for she told Lieutenant John that they had cut out the baby, and Lieutenant Johns knew this wasn't true. Oh my God, these police officers through this whole investigation are awful. Your informant is lying, Sergeant Broom informed Ronnie and told her why. Ronnie, now almost hysterical, I wouldn't doubt it at this point, told Sergeant Broom that she had misunderstood what she said. Could she talk to the Lieutenant Johns herself? But Sergeant Broom decided that she had already bothered Lieutenant enough. As far as she was concerned, she informed Ronnie the matter was closed. Holy shit, can you imagine? You're trying to help. There was an irony here. Although Ronnie Howard was unaware of it and wouldn't have appreciated it had she known, Sergeant Broom dated one of the Tate detectives, but apparently they had other more important things to talk about. Virginia Graham was having her own troubles with bureaucracy. Oh my God. Although, unlike Ronnie Howard, she was not yet completely convinced that Susan Atkins was telling the truth. The possibility that there might be more murders worried her too. On November 14th, 2 days after her transfer to Corona, she decided she had to tell someone that she had heard. There was one person at the prison she knew and trusted, Dr. Vera Dreiser, as staff psychologist. In order for an inmate to talk to a staff member at Corona, it is necessary to fill out a blue slip or a request form. Virginia made one out, writing on it, Dr. Dreiser, it is very important that I may speak with you. The form was returned with a notation stating that Miss Graham should fill out another blue slip to see Dr. Owens, administrator of the unit to which she was assigned, but Virginia didn't want to speak to Dr. Owens. Again, she requested a personal interview with Dr. Dreiser. The request was granted, but not until December, and by then, the whole world knew what Virginia Graham had wanted to tell Dr. Dreiser. That is insane. Wow. See, I think that they should be held with some sort of something for that. You have she's an inmate. Okay, fine. But she was telling the truth. She was trying to help, and you assholes wouldn't give her the time of day. That's awful. I just want to see how much, well, I'm at the end of a chapter. I just want to see if there's like a short one I could read. Okay, I'll read this bit, and then I'll stop. Sorry, I gotta get, somebody keeps messaging me. I just want to tell them I'm live. Okay. Danny DiCarlo was due at LAPD homicide at 8:30 that Monday morning. He didn't show. The detectives called his home first, getting no answer, then his mother's number. No, she hadn't seen Danny, and she was a little worried. Danny was supposed to leave his son with her so she could babysit while he went down to LAPD. Sorry. Okay, but Danny didn't even call. It was possible DiCarlo had skipped. He had been very frightened when the detectives talked to him the previous Thursday. There was another possibility, one that they didn't want to think about. That same day, Ronnie Howard had a court appearance in Santa Monica on the forgery charge. When inmates of Sybil Brand are due in court, they are first transported to men's jail on Bouchette Street, where a bus picks them up and delivers them to the assigned departments. Before the arrival of the bus, there are usually a few minutes during which each girl is permitted to make one call from a payphone. Ronnie saw her chance and got in line. However, time began running out, and there were still 2 girls ahead of her. She paid each 50 cents to let her call first. Hey, Crispy. Thank you, Lola. I appreciate that. I think there's a lot of in order to know when I'm live and stuff like that, you have to hit that bell. That's why a lot of people, I guess, aren't getting notifications. You got to hit that bell, and I don't even know which one it is. I think there's like 3 different ones, something like that. But I usually just get everything, every single thing. That way, I know when like Dom goes live and stuff like that. He usually tells me, but sometimes I don't know, and I catch the little bastard. All right. There's a bus that picks them up and delivers them to the assigned departments. Before the arrival of the bus, there are usually a few minutes during which each girl is permitted to make one call from a payphone. Ronnie saw her chance and got in line. However, time began running out and there were still 2 girls ahead of her. She paid each 50 cents to let her call first. Ronnie called the Beverly Hills Police Department and asked to speak to a homicide detective. When one came on the line, she gave him her name and booking number and told him she knew who had committed the Tate and LaBianca murders. The officer said those cases were being handled by the Hollywood division of LAPD and suggested she call them. Ronnie then called Hollywood PD, giving a second homicide officer the same information. He wanted to send someone over immediately, but she told him she would be in court the rest of the day. She hung up, however, before the officer could ask which court she would be in. All day in court, Ronnie Howard had the feeling that she was being watched. She was sure that 2 men sitting in the back of the courtroom were homicide detectives and expected at any minute they would arrange to speak to her, but they never did. When court adjourned, she was taken by bus back to Sybil Brand Dormitory 8000 and Susan Atkins. Shortly before 5 p.m., Danny DiCarlo arrived at LAPD homicide. He had been on his way downtown earlier when he noticed he was low on gas and had pulled into a service station. On leaving, he had made an illegal turn, had been spotted by a black and white, and after the officers checked and found he had some outstanding traffic tickets, had been hauled in. It had taken all day to secure his release. Unlike Al Springer, Danny DiCarlo looked, talked, and acted like a biker. He was short, 5 feet 4, weighed 130 pounds, and a handlebar mustache, tattoos on both arms, and burn scars on one arm and both legs from motorcycle pileups. Wary, frequently glancing back over his shoulder as if expecting to find someone there, he spoke in a colorful way to the interviewing officers. Nelson and Gurtiz and McGann unconsciously adopted. Now 25, he had been born in Toronto, then given U.S. citizenship after serving 4 years in the Coast Guard. His job was a weapons expert. I was born in Toronto too. Currently, he was in business with his father selling firearms. When it came to the guns at Spawn Ranch, the detectives couldn't have found a better source. When he wasn't getting drunk and chasing girls, which he admitted occupied most of his time, he looked after the weapons. He not only cleaned and repaired them, he slept in the gun room where they were kept. When a weapon was taken out, Danny knew about it. He also knew a great deal about Spawn's movie ranch, which was located in Chatsworth, not more than 20 miles from downtown Beverly Hills, yet seemingly a world away. Once William S. Hart, Tom Mix, Johnny Mac Brown, and Wallace Beery had made movies there. It was said that Howard Hughes had come to Spawn to oversee personally the filming of portions of The Outlaw, and the rolling hills behind the main buildings provided settings for Duel in the Sun. Now, except for an occasional Marlboro commercial or Bonanza episode, the main business was renting horses to weekend riders. The movie sets Longhorn Saloon, Rock City Cafe, Undertaking Parlor, jail which fronted on a Santa Susana Pass Road were old now, run down as George Spawn, the 81-year-old near-blind owner of the ranch. For years, Ruby Pearl, a one-time circus bareback rider turned horse wrangler, had run the riding stable, part of the business for George, getting hay, hiring and firing cowboys, making sure they looked after the horses and stable, and kept their hands off the 2 young girls who came for riding lessons. Almost sightless, George depended on Ruby, but at the end of the day, she went home to her husband in another life. Over the years, George had sired 10 children, each of whom he had named after a favorite horse. He could recall in detail the namesakes, but was less clear about the kids. All lived elsewhere, and only a few visited him with any regularity. When the Manson family arrived in August 1968, George was living alone in a filthy trailer, feeling old, lonely, and neglected. This was long before Danny DiCarlo became involved with the family, but he had often heard the tale from those who were there. Manson, who originally asked Spawn's permission to stay for a few days, but neglected to mention that there were 25 to 30 people with him, assigned Squeaky to look after George. Squeaky, which is Lynette Fromm, had been with Manson more than a year at the time, having been one of the first girls to join him. She was thin, red-headed, covered with freckles. Though 19, she looked much younger, DiCarlo told the detectives. She had George in the palm of her hand. She cleaned for him, cooked for him, balanced his checkbook, made love with him. She did? That old son of a gun? Yeah, Charlie's trip was to get George so He had so much faith in Squeaky that come time for George to go off into the happy hunting ground, he turned the ranch over to Squeaky. That was their thing. Charlie'd always tell her what to tell George, and she'd report back to Charlie anything anyone else told him. Squeaky maintained that she was George's eyes. According to DiCarlo, they only saw what Charlie Manson wanted them to see. Possibly because he suspected, possibly because his own children on their occasional visits strongly resisted the idea. George never did get around to willing the property to Squeaky, which the detectives surmised was probably why he was still alive out at Spawn Ranch. Really? She loved him even more? Well, yeah, probably. George Spawn had frustrated one of Charlie's plans. Danny DiCarlo had played along with, then failed to come through on another Manson scheme to get the motorcycle gangs to join him in terrorizing society, as DiCarlo put it. Danny had met Manson in March 1969, just after separating from his wife. He had gone to Spawn to repair some bikes and had stayed. I had a ball, he later admitted. Manson's girls had been taught that having babies and caring for men were their sole purpose in life. DiCarlo liked being cared for, and the girls, at least at first, appeared very affectionate toward Donkey Dan. Manson told DiCarlo that because he, Manson, was less amply endowed, he needed DiCarlo to keep the girls from running away. This sounds like a Manson con, though DiCarlo maintains it was true. A nickname they had bestowed upon him because of this. Donkey Dan was a nickname they had bestowed upon him because of certain physical endowments. Some of them did denounce Manson. There were problems. Charlie was against drinking. Seriously, he was against drinking, but did every single drug there was? Huh. Danny liked nothing better than to swill beer and lie in the sun. Later, he testified that while at Spawn, he was smashed probably 90% of the time. And with the exception of a couple of special sweeties, DiCarlo eventually tired of most of the girls. They would always try preaching to me. It was always the same shit Charlie preached to them. With August the 15th visit of the Straight Satans, Manson must have realized that he would never succeed in getting the bikers to join him. After that, Danny was ignored, left out of family conferences, while the girls denied him their favors. Though he went to Barker Ranch with the group, he stayed only 3 days. He split, DiCarlo said, because he had begun to believe all the murder talk he had heard. And because he had strong suspicions that unless he left, he might be next. After that, he said, I started watching my back. When the LaBianca detectives had talked to DiCarlo the previous Thursday, he promised to try to locate Manson's sword. He turned it over to Sergeant, who booked it as a personal property of Manson Charles M. Probable crime 187 PC murder. The sword had accumulated a history. A few weeks after Danny moved to Spawn, the president of the Straight Satans, George Null, aka 86 George, had visited him. Manson had admired George's sword and had conned him out of it by promising to pay a $20 traffic ticket George owed. According to Danny, the sword became one of Charlie's favorite weapons. He had a metal scabbard built for it next to the steering wheel of his personal dune buggy. When the Straight Satans came to get Danny the night of August 15th, they spotted the sword and reclaimed it. On learning that it was dirty, i.e., had been used in a crime, they had broken it in half. It was in 2 pieces when DiCarlo handed it over to the detective. Overall length 20 inches, blade length 15 inches. The width of its razor-sharp blade, the tip of which had been honed on both sides, was 1 inch. Are you looking for something to eat? No, are you? Because if so, I won't. I'll be done here shortly, and I'll make us something quick.
Okay, I'm just finding something to make a cool thing that I saw.
Oh, okay. This was the sword, according to DiCarlo, that Manson had used to slice Gary Hinman's ear. From DiCarlo, detectives now learned that, in addition to Bobby and Susan Atkins, 3 others had been involved in the murder of Hinman: Manson, Mary Bruner, and Bruce Davis. DiCarlo's primary source was Bobby, who, on returning to Spawn after the murder, had bragged to DiCarlo about what he had done. Or as Danny put it, he came back with a big head the next day, just like he got him a cherry. The story, as DiCarlo claimed, Bobby had related it to him went as follows. Mary Brunner, Susan Atkins, and Bobby had dropped in on Hinman, bullshitting about old times and everything like that. Bobby then asked Gary for all his money, saying they needed it. When Gary said he didn't have the money, Bobby pulled out a gun, a 9mm, polished Radom automatic, and started pistol whipping him. In the scuffle, the gun went off, the bullet hitting no one, but ricocheting through the kitchen. LASO found a 9mm slug lodged under the kitchen sink. Bobby then called Manson at Spawn Ranch and told him, "You'd better get up here, Charlie. Gary ain't cooperating." Since the Hinman residence in Malibu and Spawn's movie ranch in Chatsworth were in the same dialing area, this was not a toll call. Therefore, the telephone company kept no record of it. A short time later, Manson and Bruce Davis arrived at the Hinman residence. Puzzled and hurt, Gary pleaded with Charlie, asking him to take the others and leave. He didn't want any trouble. He couldn't understand why they were doing this to him. They had always been friends, according to DiCarlo. Charlie didn't say anything. He just hit him with the sword. Whack. Cut part of his ear off or all of it. Hinman's left ear had been split in half. So Gary went down and was really going through some changes about losing his ear. Manson gave him a choice, sign over everything or he had or die. Manson and Davis then left. Though Bobby did obtain the pink slips, California automobile ownership papers, on 2 of Hinman's vehicles, Gary continued to insist he had no money. When more pistol whipping failed to convince him, Bobby again called Manson at Spawn, telling him we ain't going to get nothing out of him. He ain't going to give up nothing, and we just can't leave. He had got his ear hacked off, and he'll go to the police, Manson replied. Well, you know what to do, and Bobby did it. Bobby said he went up to Gary again, took the knife, and stuck him with it. He said he had to do it 3 or 4 times. Hinman was really bleeding, and he was grasping for air. And Bobby said he knelt down next to him and said, Gary, you know what? You got no reason to be on Earth anymore. You're a pig and society don't need you. So this is the best way for you to go, and you should thank me for putting you out of your misery. Holy shit, like that is just disgusting. Then Hinman made noises in his throat, his last gasping breath, and wow, away he went. So Bobby told him he was a pig, right? You see, the fight against society was the number one element in this. Yeah, we'll get into his philosophy and all that bullshit later. They never did. DiCarlo went on before leaving the house. They wrote on the wall, white piggy or whitey or kill the piggies, something along that line. Bobby also dipped his hand in Hinman's blood and, using his palm, made a paw print on the wall. The plan was to push the blame onto the Black Panthers, who used the paw print as their symbol. Then they hotwired Hinman's Volkswagen and his Fiat station wagon and drove both back to Spawn Ranch, where Bobby bragged about his exploits to DiCarlo. Later, apparently fearful that the palm print might be identifiable, Bobby returned to the Hinman residence and attempted unsuccessfully to wipe it off the wall. This was several days after Hinman's death, and Bobby later told DiCarlo that he could hear the maggots eating away on Gary. Bobby, Brunner, and Atkins went to Hinman's residence on Friday, July 25th, 1969. Manson slashed Hinman's ear sometime later that night. Hinman was not killed, however, until Sunday, July 27th, and it was not until the following Thursday, July 31st, that his body was discovered by LASO, following a report from a friend who had been trying to reach Hinman for several days. As killers, they had been decidedly amateurish. Not only was the palm print identifiable, so was a latent fingerprint Bobby had left in the kitchen. They kept Hinman's Volkswagen and his Fiat at the ranch for several days, where a number of people saw them. Ironically, on July 28th, 2 LASO deputies, Olmsted and Grapp, visited Spawn Ranch on another matter. While they were there, they saw the Fiat, ran a spot check on the license, and learned that it belonged to Gary Hinman. Grapp knew Hinman. He also knew he was a friend of the people at the Spawn Ranch, and therefore didn't feel there was anything suspicious about the station wagons being there. At this time, although Hinman was dead, his body had not been discovered. After the discovery of the body on July 31st, LASO put out a warrant on Hinman's vehicles. Grapp didn't learn of it or Hinman's death until much later. If he had known, of course, he could have directed the investigation to Spawn Ranch and the Manson family months before Kitty implicated Atkins and the others. I lost my spot. Hinman had played bagpipes, a decidedly uncommon musical instrument. Bobby and the girls took his set back to Spawn Ranch, where for a time they remained on a shelf in the kitchen. DiCarlo, for one, had tried to play them. and Bobby did not discard the knife but continued to carry it with him. It was in the tire well where he was arrested on August 6th, driving Hinman's Fiat. DiCarlo drew a picture of the knife Bobby claimed he had used to stab Hinman. It was a pencil-thin miniature Bowie with an eagle on the handle and a Mexican inscription. It tailed perfectly with the knife recovered from the Fiat. DiCarlo also sketched the 9mm Radom, which as yet hadn't been recovered. The detectives asked him what other handguns he had seen at Spawn. Well, there was a .22 Buntline. When they did that Black Panther, I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to clean it. I didn't want to be nowhere around it. DiCarlo claimed he didn't know whose gun it was, but he said Charlie always used to carry it in a holster on the front of him. It was more or less always him. Sometime around July, maybe June, the gun just popped up. When was the last time you saw it? I know I didn't see it for at least a week before the raid. The Spawn Ranch raid had taken place on August 16th. A week earlier would be August 9th, the date of the Tate homicides. Did you ever ask Charlie, where's your gun? He said I just gave it away. He liked it, so I figured it was maybe just stashed. The detectives had DiCarlo draw the Buntline. It was nearly identical with the photo of the high-standard Longhorn model sent out to the LAPD flyer. Later, DiCarlo was shown the flyer and asked, does this look like the gun you mentioned? It sure does. What's the difference between that gun and the gun that you saw? No difference at all. Only the rear sight blade was different. I didn't have any. The detectives had DiCarlo run down what he knew about the murder of the Black Panther. Springer had first mentioned the killing to them when they interviewed him. In the interim, they had done some checking and had come up with a slight problem. No such murder had ever been reported. According to DiCarlo, after Tex burned the guy for $2,500 on a grass deal, the Panther had called Charlie at Spawn Ranch, threatening that if he didn't make good, he and his brothers were going to wipe out the whole ranch. That same night, Charlie and a guy named TJ went to the Panther's place in North Hollywood. Charlie had a plan. He put the .22 Buntline in his belt in the back. On a signal, TJ was to yank out the gun, step out from behind Charlie, and plug the Panther. Nail him right there. Only TJ had chickened out, and Manson had to do the shooting himself. Friends of the Black who were present when the shooting occurred had later dumped the body in Griffith Park, Danny said. Danny had seen the $2,500 and had been present the next morning when Manson criticized TJ for backing down. DiCarlo described TJ as a really nice guy. His front was trying to be one of Charlie's boys, but he didn't have it inside. TJ had gone along with Manson on everything up to this, but he told him, I don't want to have nothing to do with snuffing people. A day or two later, he fled to the wind. Yeah, I'm looking at... I'm at the first section of the photos. And there are a lot. Like a lot. There's like 2 sections, a whole bunch of them. Jeez. Jesus, there's a lot. I'll get the artsy nurse to show what she's got. She's got a lot of pictures and she's got a lot of photographs. She's got a whole bunch of stuff. I am going to stop reading though because all the rest here is just photos and my voice is my throat's starting to really hurt. I'm just going to mark where I left off. Oh yeah, I've been reading for almost 2 hours. Okay, I'm just gonna stop there. I'll mark this. It's just a field now, eh? Yeah, because didn't everything get burned down or something like that, Brittany? Like there's absolutely nothing left. If you guys do have any questions, the artsy nurse will be more than happy to answer them. Just leave them in the comment section after I end this video here. And she'll answer them. She looks at them usually, I don't know, I'm assuming like every couple days to see if anybody's got any questions. Okay, it did burn down in the 70s. All right. Okay. Oh my God, I was so hot earlier because I was mowing my lawn in the back. It took me an hour, so I was like, ugh, disgusting and sweaty. And then, yeah, I'm gonna actually end this anyways. There, Lila. You have to get going to take care of the kittens. You love this? I'm glad. I hope you enjoyed it. Remind me too. I need to do something for the members. I'm serious. I don't know what to do. I have no idea. I can't. I don't even know what you guys are. You guys are the paying members. You need to tell me what you want and let's do it. That's Brittany and Lola and who else is in here? That's a member. I think that's just used to, right? Thank you for the super sticker too. I appreciate that very much. All right, I think I'm going to end this here unless there's any questions that I can answer for you guys. If not, I'll just end it and I'll post it. And then, like I said, ask any questions. You're more than welcome to. Artsy will get on there. Yeah, it was Lola. Right, Brittany? It was like a. Well, they did Bonanza there. That was a show way back when. I guess they did some. They used that for that too in some commercials or something. It's like a Western setting. Yeah, that's what I thought as well. Yeah, there you go. It was a Western movie set. Yep. When I fail, just go to Brittany. She knows everything. Okay, I hope you guys have a great night. I'm gonna post this. Well, I guess it's already up, isn't it? I'm gonna try and post my other video. Hope you guys have a great night. What time is it? 9. Yeah, I hope you guys have a great night. And I will. It's my Virgo know-it-all. Yeah, don't forget to hit the bell. If you don't, you miss everything. It sucks. All right, I hope you guys have a good night, and I will be back. I'll still keep doing videos every day. If Venmo cooperates with me. And good night, Nancy. And I will be back on Wednesday for more KJ drama, and then again Thursday for some more Helter Skelter. And Artsy Nurse will be with me on that one. And you guys have a great night, and I hope you enjoy.